Welcome to The Lens with me, Sarah Travers. The Lens is a business in the community podcast in partnership with One Young World. Let me introduce our guests today. They are Louise Kingham, CBE, the Senior Vice President for Europe and Head of Country in the UK for BP plc, and Clayton Chaparadza, former Customer Business Development Manager at Unilever UK. Now, in this episode, we'll be discussing whether businesses can really have an impact in the communities across the UK or further afield. And we'll be discussing how strong communities are good for the economy and indeed for everyone. So to find out more, let's get into the conversation. Louise, Clayton, you're very welcome to The Lens. Louise, I'd love to start with you if you don't mind. So look, I read in your bio, Louise, that you actually joined BP only in 2021, which is a big move. And I'd love to find out a little more about how and why you chose that, but also a little bit about your journey to date.
Thanks, Sarah, and it's great to be with you here at The Lens. It's a question that I get quite a bit. I spent the first nearly 30 years working in the charity sector. So trying to champion issues like this, how does business raise the bar on all sorts of issues, from talent attraction and supporting education to enabling the right policy frameworks for business to be able to invest in local economies and grow, for communities to prosper, for industry and business to be as safe as it can possibly be, so people go home from work every day in good shape, and so on and so forth. So a lot of my time spent being very motivated to try and challenge business. So when BP produced its strategy to work towards net zero and be a net zero company by 2050 or before, and had a number of aims and ambitions wrapped around that core direction of travel, clearly that was quite interesting to me as somebody that had worked in and around the energy sector, but from a very different place, kind of on the edge of the tent. So to have the opportunity to come and work firmly inside the tent and really shape and influence that was too good to turn down. So, and it's been a very busy 3 years, and clearly, since then we've lived through a pandemic, cost of living crisis, a war that we didn't expect, and an awful lot happening in the little bit of geography that I look after for BP, which is UK and Europe. But in my spare time, I also have 3 children who I do try to go home and remind I am mum, and be useful, which I obviously love, and that's another reason for getting out of bed in the morning.
And are the two worlds, the charitable sector and your huge global organisation now with huge challenges, are they very different?
I think the ways of working are very different, and I think clearly some of the drivers or what helps you be successful are different to recognise. In the charity world, you don't have much in the way of resources, you work on a shoestring, but I think that's a very rewarding place to be. When you come into the business world, it can feel quite different in that the scale is different. A lot of the challenges and the problems and the things to solve are very, very similar, but it's just an order of scale that changes how you think about it. And clearly, if you're in a big organisation, a big piece of machinery, the ways of getting things done is different too. But otherwise, if you look at the issues that we're thinking about and trying to work towards, they're not that far apart.
And BP, even though you've only recently joined, BP has a long history with business in the community. Am I right in saying one of the founding members of business in the community? And how proud are you of that history?
Yeah, hugely proud. Even though I haven't been in BP for too long, one of the roles that I picked up when I came into the company was to chair BITC's Climate Action Leadership Teams. There are a number of teams within BITC that bring members together to strive to work towards practical action with some of the issues and the challenges that we're dealing with. So it's been an absolute delight to do that, and also support the Climate Community Fund as well, there is a newer development that is just on its way and growing. But we've also done things around just transition research. We've been a supporter of the Social Enterprise Programme. We've been the national champion for STEM, with business in the community, with the business class programme. And I think even going way back to 1981, when we joined as that founding member, is a former BP colleague who became the first managing director of BITC, I believe. So it's a bit before my time, but yeah, the history is a long and proud one.
Yeah, and it's such an important collaboration between those big companies and organisations, and never more so when there's a huge global challenge like the one that we're facing at the minute. I love that quote that one of the staff members from Business in the Community famously said, that business in the community needs to behave like a stone in a business leader's shoe. So always challenging and holding to account. So it's super to have that. But look, I know you're passionate, Louise, about today's theme, which is social impact. We're going to come back to that and talk to you more about that in a moment. But Clayton, let's bring you into the conversation now, and please do share a little bit about who you are, how you ended up getting to Unilever, and what it is that you actually do.
Thank you. And firstly, I'm really honored to be joining you today at the Lanes. I'm a former Unilever employee. So I used to work at Unilever as a business development manager until last year, September. So I joined Unilever in 2016, straight out of university. So from then, I've changed so many roles. I started off as a brand manager, looking after Southeast Africa. So at that time, I was responsible for covering Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. And then I've grown within the business from being a brand manager to going into sales, to analytics as a business analyst, and finally to being a customer development manager, which is the role that I ended with. However, at some point in 2019, I felt like I needed something that would help me to make direct impact in the community that we serve, beyond chasing targets or profits or marketing itself. So at that time, Unilever had a partnership with the UK government, the FCDO, and EY. So that partnership, they formed Transform, which is an independent organization that provides grant funding to social enterprises across South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. So I then joined Transform as a voluntary project lead. I supported 2 circular economy enterprises in Kenya. I supported sanitation enterprises in Madagascar and in Rwanda. So at the time, we were in the communities and directly with the people that needed services, particularly in low-income neighborhoods. So basically managing the grant, managing the project, mentoring them, the startups, the expertise that I have, coming out of Unilever. And then in 2023, I then decided to take a career break and further my studies. So I then came to the UK. And fortunate enough, I got the Chevening scholarship. So I've been studying at the University of Leeds from September last year to September this year. So I submitted my dissertation just last week. So I'm kind of fresh out of university. I'm still more an academic at the moment.
And what about your connection with One Young World as well, Clayton? Because I'm sure that meant that you were meeting young, brilliant, potential leaders like yourself from all over the world.
Yes. So in 2021, because of the work that I was doing with Transform, I was selected to represent Unilever. So I went to the One Young World as a delegate in Munich in 2021. So during that time, it was quite interesting because we connected with so many other young brilliant minds, who are doing amazing stuff in their own spaces. So I remember having conversations with colleagues from BMW, from Coca-Cola, from Google, trying to do something together. It helped me also to see things differently and bring new perspectives to the enterprise that I was supporting, to make them believe that they can go global, they can expand their impact in whatever capacity they have. So that was 2021. In 2023, I was invited by One Young World to come to the summit in Belfast as a delegate speaker. It was beautiful, speaking to a global audience. I am part of the UK cluster, so we regularly connect and meet up, coffee, have sessions. Also, after the One Young World, I then participated in Entrepreneurship with Purpose, which is like a connection of other entrepreneurs from different organizations, the likes of McKinsey, Nestle, P&G. We regularly connect, share experiences and discuss new trends in the impact space.
It's so vitally important, and of course it ties in totally with what we're talking about in the lens today, which is social impact, and having those global conversations is so important. But Louise, let's go back to you and delve into social a little bit more. Now, is it fair to say that when we think of BP, you wouldn't automatically think about your work in communities? So if you want to take this opportunity, I suppose, to educate us and share just what BP is doing in the community and what impact you're having as well.
Thanks, Sarah. And that's a fair observation, I guess. And even though I've been in and around the energy industry, I wasn't actively sort of seeking or understanding or seeing that work either. So I guess it's fair to say it's not much trumped about either in terms of sharing the news. I just amused as I was listening to Clayton very quickly. I was at One Young World in Belfast, not because I was a young leader, Clayton, but I was on one of those platforms in one of those meeting rooms having that conversation, a really engaging conversation about leadership on some big societal issues. So we do try and contribute to the conversation on the first level. I think for a company like BP, and we also supported a group of folks to participate in One Young World as an example of the work that we do, and also invite sort of scholars and others who are from outside the company but have some quite interesting and challenging and different positions and views about the role of energy companies in the world. But if I come back to your question, Sarah, about what does BP do in the community? For decades, for all the time that BITC has been around, and a bit longer. I mean, BP is about 116 years old, if I've got my numbers right. As a British company, we have done a lot, particularly in the area of education and skills. Not with a view to only touching the talent that we need to try and attract into the organisation, but more broadly, particularly around STEM education, for example. So we've done an awful lot of that over many, many decades, and given some rich experiences to hundreds of thousands of kids, and also a lot of support to teachers, actually. Many teachers now teach those subject areas, but they don't necessarily come from that discipline, and they probably haven't come from an industrial scientific or engineering background prior to coming into teaching. It's quite unusual to find that skill set. So as a company, we've tried to contribute there. Our staff do an awful lot of volunteering. They get paid days off to go and volunteer. So as an extension of that, they will go in and provide all sorts of talks, support activities to local organisations in communities that are close to their heart, that touch them as individuals. But we also will match funding that our staff raise through volunteer activities and charitable activities. I think where we've moved to, though, in the context of what's the role of business and responsible business in society in this context, we have now, as we go on the energy transition, we have got a very much more complicated journey ahead of us, which requires communities to actively engage with us and want the same thing. We cannot do it in isolation as a company. It also requires our customers to want the same thing. It requires our employees to want to be part of the journey. And so we've got a lot of aspects of being part of society and interconnected with society where we need to show up as being part of the answer in a way that's supportive, not coming in as a company and saying, we will do this in your local community or your environment, your workplace or your education. We actively listen to you, understand what it is that you need, what you're challenged by, and how can we make that better? How can we make a contribution more broadly than the work we will come and do as a company, in terms of the business that we're in, building energy infrastructure or big bits of kit, creating local employment opportunities. But what else do you need so that we can try and connect what the energy system does in terms of enabling well-being, improving living standards, creating opportunities for work, and as we build out some of our newer businesses, opportunities to get involved in both lower carbon projects that benefit people and place, because we have a more decentralised world when we're doing those things. My projects in Teesside are a brilliant example of that, where we are creating 3 potential big infrastructure projects, big bits of kit that wouldn't appeal to a lot of people to understand, but what those will do for the local community, for local employment, for regeneration of a deindustrialised part of the country that's suffered over a long period of time. But actually we can decarbonise and reindustrialise through building this kit and these power plants and these hydrogen plants and the facilities that support them, and also support a lot of other industries to be in that same place. So what that does for people and place and community is something quite different to that historic pattern of sort of social investment, and whether that's education, whether that's doing stuff around future woodlands or biodiversity or broader sustainability ambitions. So I guess it's about connecting the business ambition and opportunity and trying to align that with the community aspiration and create opportunity as a result, which is not easy to do.
And when you look at your business impact report from last year, 2023, you've got 81,000 jobs. 1 in every 410 jobs in the UK are with BP. So looking after your people is nearly like looking after the communities that you're in. And when you have such challenges to transition, are you hopeful that new roles will be found for 81,000 people? Obviously, it's over a period of time, but will you still be that global leader 10 years, 20 years?
I very much hope so. That's definitely the intention. I mean, I think that obviously some of those are our core employees, and then some of those numbers, the majority of those are all of the supply chain companies and the organisations that we then support and enable and require their resources to help us do the things that we do globally as a company. And I think the opportunities are vast. It's a complex journey, the transition. As a British company, we contributed about just over 17 billion, I think, to the UK GDP in 2023. So significant. The job numbers are significant. We want to pay our way. We want to contribute. As a business, as a responsible business, you've got to do that efficiently and economically and find that balance of wanting to be a responsible business, be a partner to communities and be a partner to those that need to come on the journey with you. But you have to be thoughtful about how you do that, and you can't say yes to everything. Everyone's resources are finite, sadly.
That's it, being bold and thinking differently. Absolutely incredible work there, Louise. Clayton, your experience has been a little bit different to Louise's, but you're making a significant impact as well. And just look at the jobs that you've created. You've also just made such an impact when it comes to the massive issues around waste. So can you tell us more?
I supported 2 companies in Kenya with similar names. So it's Taka Nimali and Taka Solutions. So both of them were in the circular economy space. Taka Nimali basically connected all the stakeholders in the waste management ecosystem. So they organized waste collectors. So waste collectors are generally regarded as people at the bottom of the pyramid. So those are the people that move around collecting either plastic or waste from bins or from dump sites. Taka Nimali would organize those people into community organizations, smaller focus groups of around 20, majority of them being women, and then provide training to help them to formalize their activities, provide PPE and recognition, when they move around. In some cases, those people can be mistaken for thugs or, can be called out by different names, scavengers. So with Taka Nimali, we try to provide a sense of identity and recognition when they move around. We help them to then, connect with the market, with aggregators and waste recyclers where they would sell the waste that they collect. Taka Solutions was a waste recycler. So these would be the off-taker, of the waste that's being collected by these people that move around. So it was more of a closed loop, trying to create an ecosystem around waste collection and create value for the people who are at the bottom of the pyramids, and also, to save waste that would go off to the dump site. My role basically was to help formalize the ecosystem and also to provide technical training to the companies to help them grow their operations and to expand their activities. For instance, Chaparadza Solutions, during the time that we worked together, they managed to expand into 6 different cities within Kenya. And their last expansion was actually to Kingham, which is one of the biggest refugee camps in Africa. We set up the waste collection center, provided employment to some of the refugees who were in the camp. I think over 51 refugees were now being employed by Kingham by the time that I left. Chaparadza Nimali, who is at the low end of the ecosystem, their job was obviously to get as many waste collectors as possible. We managed to expand their reach in terms of the number of collectors that they were organizing, improve the quality of life of these collectors so that they could earn a decent wage. We managed to develop a mobile application that would connect these stakeholders in the waste management ecosystem. It would connect households, it would connect recyclers, and waste aggregators. I think collectively with these 2 companies, we managed to recycle over 21,000 tons of waste, and we created over 5,000 new green jobs. So it was quite exciting, but also it was very emotional, and you would see the impact in real life.
And that's it. You have actually changed lives as well, and perhaps you were close enough on the ground to see the impact of, as you say, valuing people and what they did and how they did it, giving them a sense of purpose and a sense of respect. How did that make you feel?
You begin to see life differently. You begin to see the privileges that you have as an individual. When you then go to these spaces and create value out of waste and you see someone's life changing. I love the numbers. I love 21,000 tons. I love creating 5,000 jobs. But I think what struck me the most, during that period, I went to Kenya on a project visit. I came across this lady called Ruth. She had 2 kids. She was living on the dump site called Dandora. So Dandora is the biggest dump site in Kenya. So she was living there in a small cabin. She was feeding off the food that would come to the dump site. She came across Chaparadza Nimali and went through our waste collector training. By the time that I visited Kenya, she was now renting a decent house in one of the low-income neighborhoods. I was so proud to hear that story. And she went on to say that her kids are now going to school. By that time, her kids had no debt in terms of fees in the school. So I felt the transformation that we brought, the intervention that we had with Chaparadza Nimali and Chaparadza Solutions. But I then asked myself, I've only heard about Ruth. How many more lives are we changing? So that is what actually makes me want to do more all the time. Those personal stories and personal life-changing instances actually inspires me the most.
Yeah, you definitely need to get Ruth's story. Ruth needs to feature in that, doesn't it? We need to hear more about, I suppose, Louise, what you call really the social performance of a company. It is so much more than just the figures and the impact reports. It's the people.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely right. And I'm listening in awe and with a sense of humility to Clayton and all the things, a huge amount that you've done in a relatively short space of time. But that parallel of the business benefit that goes back into community, regardless of the geography that you're working in, is certainly something that I take away as I listen to Clayton, and I think I'm sitting here wondering, well, what on earth are you going to do next, Clayton? That's my big question is, well, what more? What really? Now you've done the studies, it's like, oh my gosh, and I guess maybe you're contemplating that right now, but it's you've had some massive achievements, and that, I think the other sense for me, Sarah, is that you want to get out of bed because you are so purpose driven about the good that you can make, and it's not fluffy stuff. This is directly benefiting people in places, in communities, whether they're your direct employees, whether they benefit from the indirect employment, or whether they simply live near something that you're doing as a company, and you can make things better for everybody. And it's just good business. It's responsible business, and it's just good business.
And Clayton, what are you going to do next? Because that's exactly what I wanted to know too.
So that's a big question. And the answer is actually, I don't know. However, I know what I'm passionate about, and I know what I enjoy doing. I enjoy helping organizations create impact. I enjoy seeing the real transformation, within communities. I enjoy seeing change directly coming from the work that we do. So in Madagascar, it's a sanitation project that we're doing. I was supporting a command called LUAT. So LUAT provides waterless flush toilets to people living in slums. There were no sanitation facilities at all. So if I can explain what they were doing before intervention, it can be so disgusting. But I've seen the company grow to save over 5,000 households. And by the time that I left, 2 years later, they've now expanded into saving Durban in South Africa. So I've seen that company grow, like directly from ground to grow. Taka Solutions was only operating in Nairobi. I've seen them go to Kisumu. I've seen them go to Kakuma. I've seen them expand to 6 different cities. I've seen lives. When I went to Kakuma, to the refugee camp, I spoke to a gentleman who told me how he got into the camp. He was from Sudan. He told me how, the war came to his village and how all his family members were massacred and how he was literally unconscious and half dead, and how the UN came and identified him and realized that his heart was still pumping, and flown to Kenya, stayed in a hospital for over a year, and then got into the camp. And that person did not have any other source of income beyond, the stipends that they get from the UN. And we created employment for that person. He became the general manager for that facility in Kakuma. So those stories and those kind of experiences, what drives me to do more. And that's exactly what I want to continue doing beyond my studies. Where will I do it? I have no idea. How will I do it? I don't know.
I think you could probably pick anywhere and go and make such a difference, and anyone would be so pleased to have you doing that. And as Louise said earlier, you achieved so much in such a short space of time. You set out to identify a problem, address it, and make a difference immediately. That's so impressive.
Thank you very much.
Louise and Clayton, I would love to know at this point if you've any questions for each other.
I guess the other thing in the back of my mind, Clayton, I just wondered, something I'm very passionate about is diversity and equity and inclusion in the work that we do, not just internally for our employees, but also externally in the world, in trying to educate and trying to inspire. Is that an area of work that you've got very involved in, given the diversity of things that you have personally done? Because I think you would be a fantastic ambassador to the cause of just trying to improve the way we think about integrated societies and bringing cultures together, and there's a lot in that, but there's much more that we need to do, I think.
Yes, it's obviously something that I would obviously be passionate about, because it's a big area also. And, inclusion also includes identifying some segments of the society that were formerly more like forgotten and not being considered or taken care of. So I come from a company that valued inclusion and diversity. And I save startups and enterprises that did not value inclusion and diversity as much as we used to. Right? So going to those companies and saving those companies, I would come in also as more of an ambassador of inclusion and diversity, and try to instill those elements within the organization that we save. That included making sure that, in whatever we do, we incorporate people with different identities, different backgrounds, be it making sure that we've got women representation in whatever we do, in the way we serve communities. So obviously, it's an area that I would obviously be willing to give it a shot.
Another string to the bow.
Yeah.
Well, Clayton, have you any questions for Louise?
I would be wondering if you could share maybe some of the work that you did. I understand BP is more global. We have BP across Africa. Some of the work that you did across the African continent.
Yeah, so we are global. I think last time 60 plus countries around the world, all about investing in and around the local community where we're working. So that can look like potential employment. It can look like community facilities or support services. It could look like doing some work around health and well-being. So it really depends on what the community need is. So we would start from a place of, is there an opportunity for us to hire locally and be able to do the things we need to do locally, so that folks that are on the doorstep, if you like, of what we're doing, where we're working, see the direct economic benefit of what we do. I would be saying, and my peers who are running bits of the BP Globe elsewhere would be saying to local leaders and dignitaries, what is it that you need? What would help from the array of things we do? So I think it's across those three things, really: environmental sustainability, building capacity for the future, and supporting livelihoods and well-being within communities. And within that frame, everywhere we look and where we work in the world, we'll be doing one or other, or maybe all of those things related to where we're operating.
Maybe one last question from my end. So one of the models that I believe in, especially for big companies, is driving inclusive growth models, where in your growth plans you also incorporate smaller enterprises who are starting, who kind of face barriers, to be integrated into models for big companies who have been in existence for years. One of the things that we've been trying to do, with the enterprise that I'm supporting, how they can be part of the value chain of the big corporations. Is that something that BP believes in, or BP does?
Yeah, so one of the numbers I didn't throw in when we were talking about economic impact was the £5.3 billion we spent last year with 2,500 companies in the supply chain, and a number of those were very entrepreneurial, very small startup businesses where we could see they had real opportunity. And there are some fantastic case studies on bp.com, so you can find it. It's public information, but in the impact report we did, we had, and the best bit of the read, Clayton, quite frankly, is a whole bunch of case studies where we changed for the good a lot of small organisations, very embryonic, to being able to change the capacity of these small businesses 2, 3, 4-fold through the work that they were doing in partnership with us. And that's part of us leaving a sustainable livelihood in play from where we've been working, right? That's part of the obligation of a big organisation like BP, to be able to do those things and foster that entrepreneurship and that innovation, and as you say, support it until it has its own stability and is able to fly.
If we could encourage our listeners to read one piece of research or one report that has inspired you to be a more responsible leader, would you share those with us, Louise?
Yeah, so if I stick with that theme around kind of diversity, equity and inclusion, which I've been passionate about for a long time, there's been a couple of people that I've been introduced to. One of those is John Amaechi, who used to be an NBA basketball player as a psychologist, and done some fantastic work on inclusion and also exclusion through the view of how our psychology works. Hugely fascinating, and you don't need to read a research paper. You can listen to him online, you can watch his interviews and listen to his stories. And I think the second one, on a similar theme, Nuala Walsh has written a couple of books around the same sorts of things, in terms of we can have all of the processes and the systems inside companies and business to do the right thing, but actually, a bit like Clayton and I and you have been discussing here, it's about mindset, and it's about how our psychology and our behaviours kick in, which is what can be either inhibiting or absolutely transformative. And I think when we're talking about being minded to pursue social impact and social investment, as we are, your mindset's got to be really strong and motivated. So it's an inner purpose, but you also need to be pretty resilient and understand how other people work to really have the impact that you want.
Really good, Louise. And Clayton, what about you?
Yes, I've been inspired by most of the work that's been done by a gentleman called Paul Polman. So Paul Polman is a former Unilever CEO. He's so passionate about impact in the communities that we serve. He believes that businesses can be a force for good. And recently he's been focusing his research around net zero. I feel like what he believes and what he writes about and what he speaks about creates a form of new ways of working and new businesses and new opportunities for businesses who are existing or new businesses coming up. So I believe that, if you can go through and listen to some of his videos on YouTube and some of what he writes, about net zero, you can have a sense of how the future can look like if we change the ways we are doing business at the moment.
Thank you so much, Clayton. Final question. As responsible leaders, what are you personally committed to doing more of or less of in the coming year? Clayton.
I would like to spend more of my time to help small enterprises, especially impact-driven enterprises, to help them, accelerate the impact that they make in communities, and to share the knowledge that I have, both from my experience at Unilever and coming to the UK, having, learned more about AI. I believe I have more to offer in that regard that could help upcoming businesses to grow.
Louise.
While these conversations are fantastic and really important to have, let's talk more action from those that get it and understand the impact that we can have. But I will definitely do more of trying to get those boots on the ground, the shovels in the ground, and building these projects across the UK and Europe, which is my bit of the BP Globe that I lead on, so that we can bring some of the benefits that we've been talking about today to people and communities in different places.
Thank you so much to Louise Kingham, CBE from BP, and Clayton Chaparadza, formerly from Unilever, but changing the world. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of The Lens, where we've been looking at how businesses can positively impact communities and indeed hearing how. You've been listening to The Lens with me, Sarah Travers, and if your business would like help with impacting, then please visit www.bitc.org.uk. Thanks so much for listening, and do tune in next time.